everyone, Acting Solo Lieutenant Bram here. We are going to be sewing badges today, and at the end of the video I'm also going to be showing you how to wear your lanyard on your tunic. So keep watching until the end, please. So what you will need for your sewing your badges is you're going to need all your badges that were issued to you, your shoulder badges, and your core crest is what will be issued to you first. You're going to also need a thimble for those hard places where you might need more pressure to push through your sewing needle that you're going to need. Choose one, not multiple. Please just choose one. And you're going to also need some clothespins to pin your badges in place so that they don't move on you. I've already pre-sewn on 2 examples, so that will take out less time, and then that way you guys can see them right away. And I also have my example that I'm going to be using here. The only difference between this example and what you are going to be doing is I'm using yarn of a different color so that you can see the examples that I'm going to show you at the end. But when you are doing it, you are going to want to match up the thread with the main color or the edge of your badge so that the thread can hide in plain sight for you. And you can see with the Nuka core crest or whichever core crest that you have, you go with the outer edge of the badge. So with the Nuka core crest, you are going to need a deep navy blue thread. Okay, so we're going to get started. The first stitch, and you're going to notice this with your badges too. If you look really closely at the edge of your badge, whatever it is, sometimes the stitch of the edging will go all the way to the edge and it'll be just one stitch. But sometimes with badges, the stitch will go halfway and then another stitch will start. So it's almost like you've got 2 channels of stitching on some of the badges. But don't worry, I'm going to be showing you 2 different ways to make it easy to sew on your badge. And with my example here, I did 2 streams of sewing. So it's like 1 row here and 1 row there, just so that they're as close to identical as possible for you. Okay, so when you start out, you want to get your sewing needle, cut the amount of thread that you think you may need, and you're going to thread your thread through the eye of the needle at the top, and then you're going to take it and have it and make sure that your 2 ends meet up, and then you're just going to do a simple roundabout knot. And so that you guys can see what I'm talking about, so you take your 2 ends, you put it around your finger, and then you take your 2 ends, you go through that hole that you just made or that eye that you just made, and you pull tight. And that's the kind of knot that you want to start out with. If you think that it's not going to stay in place, do multiple knots on top of each other so that it has a better anchor for you when you start. Okay, so example number 1. You want to go up through your badge like that and pull through until you have your knot on what would be the inside of your tunic sleeve. Then you're going to take your needle. Of course, this isn't a regular needle, but nonetheless, you're going to take your needle. You're going to go under your threading for a maximum of 2 millimeters, and you're going to come out and up, pulling the thread through And then right where you came up through the threading on the edge, you're going to take your needle and you're going to go right down in between and pull through. And this side is going to represent the inside of your sleeve. So you guys are going to have to be careful, because if you're not paying attention, you will poke yourself with the pokey end of your needle. So please be careful with that. So after you're done that, on the inside of your sleeve, you go another 2 millimeters at the most. And you go through your bottom side of the sleeve, or the inside of your sleeve, through the top of the badge and pull through. Okay, and then the same thing as what we did here. We're gonna go under the stitching and come out, pulling it all the way through. And then where we came out again, we're gonna go in between the stitches and push all the way through again. And this, if this is the stitch you want to use, you keep doing that until you have done all sides of your badge. When you have your badge on your sleeve, you do not want to be able to put your fingers in at any point underneath your badge. If your fingers are able to fit anywhere after you're done stitching, you need to get a seam ripper, take it all apart, and start over. Because that's one of the things that the officer or the senior cadet that's inspecting you is going to look for. You want it to be on there securely. Because back in the olden days, if an officer was inspecting you and they were able to get their fingers underneath that badge, they'd rip it off of your uniform in front of everybody. So we want to make sure that those badges are secure. See, nobody takes them away from you. Nobody. Okay, so I'm gonna finish up the stitching here so that you guys can see a good example of what I'm talking about. Please do not iron or use a sewing machine to put your uniform badges on. That wrecks the uniform. Please use good old-fashioned needle, thread, thimble, and hands. Because you'll see on the back of the badges, all of this shiny stuff is to help keep all of your letters and the fancy sewing in place on the badge. That's the purpose for all of that shiny reinforcement on the badge. It's not for ironing. It's not glue. It's a plastic. So when you try and iron that on your uniform, that is hard to get off, and we have to destroy the tunic after you do that. So please do not iron your uniform badges on. Please do not. And when you use your sewing machine, that also wrecks the badge and the uniform. Because when a cadet returns their tunic with their badges, us as supply have to take all those badges off in order to ensure the quality and the care of the tunic. So please do not use a sewing machine. Okay, so here is the first example. Of course, this is more than 2 millimeters because it's a big example, but on your tunic, please do not go more than 2 millimeters per stitch. Okay, because we are trying to hide the stitch on the badges. And so our first example that I have pre-done, this badge here, the Royal Canadian Sea Cadets, I have used the first example of sewing that I have just shown you. And the stitch is completely hidden. I can't get my fingers in there anywhere. I've already tried. So that one is good to go. Our next stitch. Our next stitch is going to be along the inside edge of the badge, as close as you can. So as you can see, the inside edge there, and the badge itself has a texture to it. So you want to try and make all of your sewing, or little pin sewing as it would be termed as small as you can to the texture of the badge. And what you're going to be doing is bringing your needle and thread up, and then like less than half a millimeter away from where you came up with your thread, you're going to go back down through the badge with your thread. And then that way it hides the stitch. So we're going to show it with the big example again. You're going to come up. Come on. You're going to come up through your badge, and then less than a half a millimeter away, you're going to go right back through. That's almost right on top of each other, but it isn't. It's one right in front of the other. And I'm going to leave that little puff there so that you guys can have a little visual. Nice thing about working with paper is that it doesn't like to always stay. Gotta do it again. Okay. There. And then again. And then you're gonna, every millimeter to 2 millimeters, you're going to make that pin stitch. So up and pull through, and then right next to it, half a millimeter away, you go through again. And then the same thing. I'm just going to keep doing it here. You just keep following the inner edge of your badge until you're done the entire badge. Come on. When you're sewing your badge, it won't go through on you because it has that plastic protective backing to it. Right? And that's how the second stitch will look on the outside. And then on the inside of the sleeve where your arm will be, that's roughly what you want to see on the inside of your sleeve. That they're close together, that there's no way that you can put your finger through your badge to tear it off. Okay? And then when you're finished, when you've had it all done, you get your scissors, you cut it, and then you do that same knot that I had showed you at the beginning so that you can anchor it in place. And then once you have done that, you will be set to go and looking sharp for inspection. For the placements of the badge, or badges I should say, of all the badges, that will be given to you in your new entry handbook and also in papers given to you by supply. And just to show you guys, the Nootka badge here is an example of what the second stitch would look like. So again, also hidden, or if you do see it, it's just very, very small and minuscule. Okay, so as promised, like I said in the beginning of the movie, I'll show you guys how your lanyard should look on your tunic. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your lanyard is nice and hidden by your collar, front and back. You don't have to tuck it up into the collar there. It's nice and snug. It's not going nowhere. And then the main Turk's head slip knot you want on the second button from your collar, right on top there. And then what you're going to do with the rest, the rest of the rope needs to come down and make a loop by the third button from the collar. And then you're going to take what's left and coil it up or bunch it up, whatever you want to do. You put it in your right pocket. Also, with your belt, you want to make sure that your buckle is in line with your buttons. And if it's two size, you shouldn't have to worry about too much excess after threading your belt through the buckle. But if you have an abundance of belt still after threading it through the buckle, tuck it in to, like, if you have an abundance, you go over your belt loop and you tuck it in underneath so that the pointed part is pointing back to the buckle. And that way it's nice and it's flat and it's out of your way when you are doing drill. And as always, if you guys have any questions related to cadets or not to cadets, feel free to ask your officer or DPO. And if we don't know the answer, we'll definitely find it. All right, see you soon.